Polish farmers have once again taken to the roads, this time all over Poland. The farmers' protests are a direct result of inaction, chaotic decision-making, and a lack of real support from Polish politicians. For months, we have seen one thing: a lack of action, a lack of dialogue, and a lack of responsibility towards farmers. Farmers' protests took place in over 200 locations. What is happening today is really an act of desperation on the part of farmers, because they are being pushed to the wall. The government is not dealing with agricultural programs. The Polish Ministry of Agriculture and the Prime Minister are not solving our key problems, which are actually killing our industry. We are not standing here to show our powerlessness. We just want to show that we are here, we want to produce, and we still have some faith in ourselves, that we want to produce something else on this Polish soil. The main demand is to block the European Union's agreement with the Mercosur bloc. This agreement simply has to be thrown in the trash. It cannot be agreed to. There is no such thing as goodwill on the part of those in power. There isn't. Tusk has stated unequivocally that the Mercosur agreement will be signed, and he will not block it. Until the previous government was still in power, there was a so-called blocking minority: France, Belgium, Italy, Poland, Ireland, and until that moment, the agreement with Mercosur had not been signed, and there was no consent to it. France, under pressure from nationwide protests, pushed through the postponement of a key vote on Mercosur and is trying to unite other EU countries to form a blocking minority against this agreement, which is disastrous for European and our agriculture. When it comes to Mercosur, it's very simple. As a member state, we are not asking for this agreement to be postponed, but we do not agree with it at all. We say no to Mercosur. The Italian government, which has not yet made a final decision, shares this view. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said that the distribution of the European Union's agricultural budget is detrimental to Italy, which is why they are having problems with agricultural producers and cannot sign the agreement at this time. A trade agreement with the Mercosur bloc of countries would allow cheaper, much lower quality agricultural products from South America to be imported without customs duties or other additional charges. Signing this agreement would be disastrous for countries with developed agriculture, such as Poland, but beneficial for industrial countries such as the Netherlands and Germany. That is why the president of the European Commission, a German, is pushing for the signing of this agreement.
We need a few extra weeks to address some issues with member states, and we have reached out to our Mercosur partners and agreed to postpone slightly the signature.
Although the agreement with Mercosur countries has not yet been signed, demand for Polish agricultural products is already declining. This is being felt, for example, by sugar beet growers in eastern Poland. I had 20 hectares of beets there, so I have to reduce it to 15. I am also a malt and barley grower, and I hear the same thing, that they don't need barley, malt for brewing, etc. anymore. I suspect that it's all coming from somewhere else, or is about to come. Food from Mercosur countries may be cheaper at first, but when Polish agriculture collapses, we will have no choice but to buy foreign food, and then countries outside the European Union may raise their prices. How much can we subsidize, and from what really? We can keep it up for a year or two, but in the long run it's not possible. In their protest, farmers also want to draw attention to other, equally important issues. In addition to Mercosur, we have problems with Ukraine. There is further liberalization of trade with Ukraine, which will come into effect in January, a five-fold increase in the sugar quota. Grain prices are what they were 20 years ago, and we know how much costs have risen, how much energy, fuel, and labor costs have risen. This is a protest by farmers and consumers. The issue of agriculture is not exclusively a matter for farmers. It is also a consumer issue. This is because consumers will also pay for this incompetence. Although farmers are protesting peacefully today, they are already announcing intensified strikes in the new year.
Didier Reynders, former Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium and former European Commissioner for Justice, must explain to the Belgian judiciary the mysterious €1 million that allegedly came from unknown sources into his account. The politician denies all allegations, but further doubts are emerging about him. Politicians from Poland's Law and Justice Party are demanding an investigation into whether the suspicious money in Reynders' account could have come from Russia. And unofficial sources tell us the Belgian authorities also have much more serious suspicions about him. Was Didier Reynders a Russian agent? A few years ago, such a question addressed to one of the EU's most important commissioners would have seemed absurd. Today, however, it is on everyone's lips. There are reports, albeit unverified, alleging that Belgian services have long been looking into Didier Reynders from various strange angles. And I will say that Didier Reynders' brother, supposedly an architect, seems to have taken lucrative contracts from the Russian embassy in Brussels. But suspicions toward the former European Union commissioner began to swell even before he became one of the EU's fiercest critics of Poland and its then conservative government. Suspicions of contracts with Russia date back to 2018, when, after the assassination attempt on former GRU officer Sergei Skripal in the United Kingdom, European intelligence services decided to expel 23 Russian diplomats from European Union countries. Belgium resisted the idea for a very long time, but in the end, it symbolically removed one diplomat. There were 240 of them left in Belgium. Didier Reynders was the foreign minister and deputy prime minister of Belgium at the time, who today has been charged with money laundering. The public has not been informed where he got the money from. According to the Belgian authorities, Didier Reynders laundered around 1 million euros over many years. The money was, allegedly, deposited in a bank and put into circulation through unusual transactions related to the purchase of lottery tickets. For me, it would be important to check whether these leads don't originate in Moscow or Belarus. Though there is currently no known evidence that the money came from Russia, questions about this are entirely justified. Didier Reynders was EU Commissioner for Justice, which means he was responsible for the rule of law, sanction mechanisms, and indirectly for the legal framework for sanctions against Russia after 2014 and 2022, but also for putting pressure on EU member states.
In Poland, the independence and impartiality of the Supreme Court's disciplinary chamber is not guaranteed.
Polish judges are European judges.
Didier Reynders was the author of a report on the rule of law, which attacked Poland in an extremely brutal manner, attacking the conservative Law and Justice Party's government, among other things, for detaining Spanish journalist Pablo González. Pablo González later turned out to be a fake identity of Pavel Rubtsov, a colonel in the Russian GRU. In recent years, real Russian influence operations in Europe have also been revealed: party financing, lobbying, and even corruption. The actions of the European Union, which has accused and continues to accuse Poland of violating the rule of law, work in Russia's favor because Poland is being undermined politically. The point is for Poland, one of the Russian Federation's main adversaries in Europe, to be a country with little influence inside the European Union. This would explain the financial penalties which, even after the outbreak of war in Ukraine, the European Union imposed on Poland more willingly and more swiftly than on Russia. Currently, the total amount of penalties exceeds 160 million euros, pending a possible positive change in the legal situation in Poland. One such change was to be the recognition of the supremacy of EU law over the Polish constitution. Didier Reynders demanded that the then Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki withdraw the question he asked to the Constitutional Tribunal of Poland about whether Polish or EU law takes precedence. I would like to draw attention to Poland's Constitutional Tribunal. Here, the Commission decided to refer Poland's case to the Court of Justice due to the Constitutional Tribunal's violation of EU law in its 2022 rulings. Mateusz Morawiecki did not withdraw his question, but the very fact that a man with such a history did so raises questions. Here we had a possible Russian agent in the EU using his influence to sanction and isolate Poland. The whole smear campaign against Poland and the alleged violation of the rule of law during the Law and Justice Party's rule is largely the result of Russian psyops, as was also stated by former US Ambassador to Poland, Georgette Mosbacher. The EU is currently dealing with the rule of law in Poland and debating sanctions. It is time to say it out loud. When it comes to problems with the rule of law, much of what reached the West was the result of Russian disinformation. Both the EU and US accepted it uncritically. Hence, the interpellation is submitted by Law and Justice MPs to the European Commission in November. In it, they demanded the Commission investigate whether Reynders' actions, including his attacks on Poland, were inspired by Russia. This is a key issue for Polish national interests, because Russia intensified these covert activities, both in the European Commission and in the European Parliament, after the outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian war. This was actually intended to weaken the country that supported Ukraine's struggle for independence. If the allegations against Didier Reynders are confirmed, he faces up to 5 years in prison, a fine, and even forfeiture of his assets. If the suspicions of espionage are confirmed, the former European Union Commissioner for Justice could be sentenced to up to 20 years in prison. Protests are a very unusual sight in Iran. Anti-government protests are spreading from Tehran to other cities. Crowds chanting the name of Reza Shah, a symbol of secular Iran before the Islamic Revolution, are a harbinger of the worst-case scenario for the Ayatollahs ruling the Islamic Republic of Iran. The government will listen patiently, even if harsh voices are raised, because we believe our people are patient enough, and when they raise their voices, it means the pressure they are under is great. It is the government's job to listen to these voices and help reach an agreement to solve existing social problems. The government's official position does not calm the mood on the streets. Inflation is already over 50%. And the value of the Iranian rial is plummeting. Instead of focusing on fuel, the government should focus on other goods and lower their prices. For example, dairy products become more expensive 5 or 6 times a year. Other goods become more expensive 10 times a year, and they only focus on the price of fuel. One spark can turn protests into riots, and from there, it is very close to bloodshed. Hence, the old and well-known tactic, escalating external conflicts, which can intimidate but also unite the nation around the government. The Ayatollahs are reminding Iranians who their enemy is and where they should look for the causes of the tragic state of the Iranian economy. The actions taken by the United States against Iranian nuclear facilities had absolutely no legal basis. Repeatedly boasting about this crime only increases America's responsibility. Sooner or later, the United States must be held accountable for this unlawful behavior. Iran declares it does not intend to give up uranium enrichment and plans to rebuild the infrastructure destroyed by the Americans in its underground bases. This narrative has reached the White House.
Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down, we'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter. You know, they could have made a deal the last time before we went through,
But Iran's decision isn't about being the smartest. It's about maintaining influence. A similar message is coming from Israel, which is warning Tehran against attempting to rebuild Hezbollah's influence and finance terrorists in Yemen. Given the growing anti-government sentiment in Iran, it is almost certain that the highest religious leaders will escalate tensions on the international stage to redirect the anger on the streets toward an external enemy.
Earlier today, Eurostar suspended its cross-channel train services to and from London, following a power supply problem in the tunnel that links Great Britain and France, disrupting peak winter holiday rail travel.
I realized I've been traveling normally by plane or by car, and it's actually the first time that I've used the trains. And I have an Interrail ticket for senior people, and I was excited to find out how it works. And since I started in Zurich, I just had troubles with the reservations, with overbookings, with cancellations of the train.
Today I'm going from London, but Eurostar is all day, everything and cancel.
The disruption affects one of Europe's busiest international rail corridors at the height of the winter travel season.
I'm questioning how I will stay here, for a hotel and all this stuff, so I have no idea what to do now, to be honest.
I mean, all the planning for New Year festivities will be cancelled, and we'll still have to see how and when do we get home and how.
Tomorrow I work, and it's shame because I don't know if I have a hotel for tonight, so it's very complicated.
In a statement on its website, the high-speed train operator warned passengers to expect severe delays. Eurostar trains out of London serve Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, and Disneyland Paris.
We've arranged a day trip to go to a theme park just on the other side of Belgium, and we were supposed to leave at 8:24 this morning, and it is now 12:32. So our train back is at 7 o'clock this evening, so there's no point in us going now, and we're stuck in the the traffic with everybody. Yeah, and we can't leave because technically we're in France, so we're stuck basically.
Eurostar blamed overhead power supply issues in the Channel Tunnel and what it said was a failed train operated by Le Shuttle, which transports vehicles and their passengers by rail through the tunnel between the ports of Calais, France, and Folkestone, England. The Channel Tunnel's operator, Eurotunnel, said in a separate statement that the power supply problem started overnight Monday in part of the tunnel, impacting both passenger and vehicle travel by rail in both directions through the tunnel. There was no suspicion of foul play or sabotage. Eurostar said its cross-channel train services were gradually resuming as the tunnel that links Britain and France had partially reopened on Tuesday afternoon. Getlink, which operates the tunnel infrastructure and the Le Shuttle service carrying cars and trucks, said repairs to the power supply were underway and that traffic services were slowly being restored in both directions.